The reactor core screamed like a wounded animal dying in the dark. Kira Sullivan's hands flew across the emergency console, her fingers dancing through holographic controls that flickered red with warnings no engineer ever wanted to see. Radiation levels climbed past fatal thresholds. Core temperature exceeded safe parameters by 400%. And through the cracked view screen ahead, three Syndicate warships closed in like vultures circling wounded prey. Kira, the containment field is collapsing, Zara's voice cracked with panic. The Thrask woman gripped the engineering station with all four arms, her cobalt blue skin pale with terror, silver tendrils standing rigid with stress. We have maybe 90 seconds before complete meltdown. The bridge shook violently. Another plasma barrage hammered the hull. Somewhere deep in the ship's mechanical guts, metal shrieked and tore like fabric. Emergency lighting cast everything in sick yellow shadows that made the blood on Kira's hands look black. The air tasted like copper and ozone, and the particular flavor of fear that came when death stopped being theoretical. Kira's green eyes locked on the reactor display. Numbers climbed into the red, then into colors that shouldn't exist on normal engineering readouts. Her father's words echoed in her mind across 10 years of silence, 10 years of grief, 10 years of unanswered questions. Human ships don't quit, Kira. When everything's falling apart, when every system says it's impossible, we find a way. We always find a way. Her hand hovered over the emergency vent controls. The protocol her father had hidden in this ship's systems before he died. The weapon disguised as a last resort. The insane gamble that might save them or kill them, but at least meant they'd die fighting. Protocol Declan Alpha, she whispered to the ship's damaged computer. Her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Authorization Sullivan Kira 7. The console chimed, a sound like a bell in a cathedral. Accepted. No, Zara's secondary eyes went wide with horror, all four of them fixed on Kira with an expression that suggested she was watching someone commit suicide in slow motion. You cannot be serious. You'll kill us all. Kira turned to look at her partner. 8 years they'd worked together. 8 years of salvage jobs and close calls and impossible repairs. 8 years of gradually building something that resembled trust and friendship and family in the cold dark between the stars. Zara had saved her life twice, maybe 3 times if you counted that disaster on Titan Station when the hull breach almost sucked them both into vacuum. My father taught me something, Kira said quietly. The ship bucked as another impact struck home, throwing them both against their restraints. 20 seconds until meltdown, 15, 10. Human ships don't die clean, they die fighting. She slammed her palm down on the vent control with all the force of desperation and determination. And neither do I. The universe turned white. Port Meridian Station hung in the darkness like a steel spiderweb, orbiting 200 kilometers above the Texas wasteland far below. Through the observation windows of the salvage district, Earth rotated slowly in its eternal dance. The Gulf Coast glittering with city lights against the black ocean like diamonds scattered on velvet. Kira didn't look at the view anymore. She'd seen it 10,000 times. It had stopped meaning anything around the same time her bank account had stopped containing money. She stared at her computer screen instead, at the Galactic auction house website displaying row after row of broken dreams and shattered fortunes. Spacecraft for sale. Most of them junk. Some of them expensive junk that would cost more to repair than they'd ever be worth. A few worth buying if you had the credits and the nerve and a tolerance for risk that bordered on clinical insanity. She had the nerve. She had the tolerance for risk. The credits, though, the credits were the problem. The credits were always the problem. The office smelled like recycled air and cheap coffee and decade-old desperation that had soaked into the walls like smoke. 3 meters by 4 meters of cramped space that barely qualified as an office at all. A desk that had seen better days sometime around the year Kira was born. A chair that creaked ominously every time she shifted her weight, threatening to finally give up and collapse. File cabinets overflowing with the repair manifests and salvage permits and unpaid invoices that seemed to reproduce like bacteria in a petri dish when she wasn't looking. On the corner of her desk, a photograph in a cheap plastic frame. 2 images side by side in a bifold display. On the left, Captain Declan Sullivan in his Navy dress uniform, face weathered by years of void combat but smiling. silver threading through red hair at his temples and crow's feet around eyes the same emerald green as hers. The photo was 20 years old. He'd been 40 then, standing proud and tall in front of the USCV Resolute before her final mission into the Kepler Nebula. For the mission that killed him and 43 others and left questions that nobody in the Navy seemed interested in answering. He never came back. Nobody came back. On the right, Bryn, 8 years old in her St. Catherine's boarding school uniform, gap-toothed smile and wild red hair that refused to stay in braids no matter how much gel and prayer you applied. Her daughter, her reason for everything. Her reminder that some fights were worth fighting even when the odds said you should have surrendered years ago. The tuition invoice sat next to the photograph like a small rectangular monument to financial failure. 12,000 credits due in 30 days. Kira had 800 credits in her business account, maybe 200 in personal funds if she skipped eating for the next week. The math didn't work. The math never worked anymore. She'd gotten used to math not working, had learned to live with permanent low-level panic about numbers that refused to add up correctly. She scrolled through the auction listings with the desperate energy of someone looking for miracles in mundane places. Vithen pleasure yacht, minimal damage, starting bid 80,000 credits. She scrolled past it without pausing. Might as well be 8 million for all the chance she had of affording it. Crash cargo hauler, perfect condition, starting bid 150,000. Beautiful ship, wrong universe for her bank account. A Krell gunship with a cracked reactor housing. Starting bid 20,000. Tempting for about 3 seconds until she remembered that repairing Krell reactors cost another 20,000 minimum, and that was if nothing else was wrong, which it always was. Everything on the screen was either too expensive or too damaged or both. Story of her life, story of every salvager's life. You picked through other people's failures hoping to find something that wasn't quite as broken as it looked. The coffee in her mug had gone cold an hour ago. She drank it anyway because coffee was coffee and she was too tired to make fresh. Tasted like motor oil and regret and poor life choices made at 3 in the morning. Her communicator chimed. Video call incoming. The display showed a familiar contact name that made her chest tighten with a complex mixture of love and guilt and inadequacy. Bryn. Kira ran fingers through her hair, trying to make herself look less like someone who'd slept 4 hours in the last 48 and more like a mother who had everything under control. Failed completely at the transformation. Accepted the call anyway because avoiding your daughter's calls was where bad parenting crossed the line into actual abandonment. Bryn's face appeared on the screen, all freckles and enthusiasm, an innocent trust that Kira was terrified of breaking. She wore her sleeping clothes, hair down around her shoulders in the wild tangle that was apparently a family genetic trait. St. Catherine's dormitory visible behind her with its institutional walls and regulation furniture. Mama! That smile could light up stations, could probably light up small planets if you pointed it correctly. I missed you today. We had astronomy class and Mr. Henderson said Earth has 300 orbital stations now. Is Port Meridian one of them? We're one of the biggest, little star. Kira forced her voice to stay light, cheerful, not the voice of a woman drowning in debt and making decisions about which bills to ignore this month. 2 million people live here. We've got everything. Repair docks, manufacturing sectors, research facilities. It's practically a city in space. When can I visit? Bryn's eyes went wide with hope, with the kind of pure, uncomplicated wanting that children had before life taught them to temper their expectations. You promised after term break. That's in 6 weeks. Can I come see the salvage yard? Can I see a real spaceship up close? Can I touch one? Soon, sweetie. The lie tasted worse than the cold coffee, stuck in her throat like broken glass. Mama's working on something special right now. Something that might let us spend more time together. Promise? Kira's throat closed around words she didn't have. She managed to nod instead. Hoped it looked convincing. They talked for another 10 minutes. Bryn told stories about her classes and her friends and the telescope they'd used to look at Jupiter's moons. Enthusiastic 8-year-old stories that jumped from topic to topic with the attention span of a caffeinated hummingbird. Kira listened and made the right noises and felt her heart break a little more with each word, each reminder of what she couldn't provide, each evidence of the childhood she was giving her daughter, in institutional dormitories instead of actual homes. When the call ended, the office felt colder, emptier. The silence had weight. She turned back to the auction screen, scrolled through 3 more pages of expensive impossibilities. Her finger hovered over the browser close button. She should give up, go home, sleep, try again tomorrow when the universe might be slightly less determined to crush her. Then she saw it, Lot 847. The listing was almost aggressively honest, which in the auction business usually meant the item was spectacularly terrible. Honesty was what sellers deployed when they'd given up on actually making money and just wanted the wreckage gone. HSV Defiant, human-made armored cargo hauler, pre-confluence era. Severe combat damage. Hull integrity compromised in 17 locations. Life support systems questionable at best. Navigation completely non-functional. Reactor showing signs of instability. Sold as is with absolutely no warranty. Starting bid 50 credits. Kira leaned forward, read it again. Then a third time because surely she'd misread something. 50 credits. For an armored cargo hauler. That was less than a decent dinner at the station's restaurants. Less than a tank of shuttle fuel. Less than absolutely anything that wasn't actively worthless. The attached images loaded slowly on the cheap station network. When they finally appeared in all their high-resolution glory, she understood why nobody wanted this ship. The HSV Defiant looked like it had fought a war and lost. Badly. Multiple times. Possibly against the entire Carex fleet simultaneously. The hull was a nightmare patchwork of scorch marks from plasma weapons. Holes everywhere, some small and neat. Others ragged tears that looked like something with very large teeth had taken bites out of the structure. Entire sections melted by something incredibly hot and incredibly angry. One cargo pod just gone, replaced by twisted metal and empty space where attachment points had been torn away. The armor plating was a chaotic mess of different materials, mismatched panels welded on apparently at random, without any regard for aesthetics or engineering standards or making sense. It was ugly. Phenomenally, spectacularly, almost artistically ugly. The kind of ugly that suggested someone had actively tried to make it worse. But human ships had a reputation in the galaxy. The Crash were brilliant engineers who built ships with perfect efficiency, elegant mathematics-made metal, every system optimized to theoretical limits. The Vithon built elegant vessels that could dance through asteroid fields like ballet dancers, all grace and beauty and fluid motion that made poets write bad verses about metal becoming art. The Krell built massive warships that could blow up moons, intimidate solar systems, make entire species reconsider their foreign policy decisions. Humans built ships that survived, not because they were pretty or fast or powerful, but because humans were apparently too stubborn to accept that things should break when physics said they absolutely definitely must break. Human cargo runners made deliveries through zones that other species wouldn't even fly near with military escorts. Human exploration vessels kept running decades past their expected lifespan, held together by spite and improvisation and refusal to acknowledge that machines had limits. Human warships limped home after battles that should have vaporized them completely, trailing atmosphere and debris, but still somehow maintaining enough thrust to make it back to dock. The galaxy had a saying that got repeated in bars and trading posts and engineering academies. Crash ships work perfectly until they don't. Human ships work terribly until forever. Kira watched the auction timer count down. The starting bid of 50 credits sat there for a full minute with no takers. Not surprising. Who wanted a broken human cargo hauler that was probably radioactive and definitely falling apart and looked like it would disintegrate if you looked at it too hard? The timer hit 30 seconds. The auctioneer's holographic projection appeared above the listing. A Vithon male who looked deeply, profoundly embarrassed to even be associated with this particular lot. His expression suggested someone had lost a bet, and this was the punishment. Lot 847 going once at 50 credits. His voice carried all the enthusiasm of someone reading obituaries. HSV Defiant, human cargo hauler, as is condition. Nobody bid. The auction channel sat silent, except for the quiet background hum of thousands of other simultaneous auctions proceeding with actual interested parties. Going twice at 50 credits. Still nothing. Crickets. Digital tumbleweeds rolling across the auction interface. The price automatically dropped according to standard auction protocols. 20 credits. Then 10. Getting desperate now. Even the auctioneer looked vaguely concerned that they might have to pay someone to take this wreck away. Kira glanced at her account balance. She had exactly 7 credits in her daily spending account. That was supposed to cover lunch for the rest of the week. Cheap station food, probably nutritionally questionable, but food nonetheless. She looked at the ship again, at the battle damage and the desperate repairs, and the stubborn fact that this absolute wreck was still in one piece, despite everything the universe had clearly thrown at it, despite physics, despite common sense, despite every reasonable expectation. Her father's voice whispered in memory, that last conversation before his final mission, before the Kepler Nebula run that killed him and everyone else aboard the Resolute, before he disappeared into the dark and left her with questions that would never have answers. Kira, promise me something. When you look at broken things, don't just see what's wrong. Look for what's still fighting, what refuses to quit. That's where you find value nobody else can see. That's where you find what matters. She clicked the bid button, entered 7 credits. Her finger hovered over the confirm button for exactly 1 heartbeat of hesitation. Then she pressed it. The auctioneer blinked in genuine surprise, expression shifting from bored resignation to mild shock. We have a bid. 7 credits from bidder 7731. Going once. Going twice. Silence stretched across the auction channel like a held breath. Sold to bidder 7731 for 7 credits. The office door slid open behind her before the confirmation even finished loading. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The distinctive sound of 4 arms crossing simultaneously was hard to mistake. Please tell me you didn't just spend money on something catastrophically stupid. Zara stood in the doorway like a small blue monument to disapproval. 4 arms crossed in universal body language for "I told you so," mixed with "Why do I even bother?" Her cobalt skin caught the overhead lights, making her look like some ancient ocean deity come to pass judgment on poor financial decisions. The silver tendrils on her head quivered with irritation, which was never a good sign. When Zara's tendrils quivered, bad things were about to be discussed at length. "Define stupid," Kira said, still not turning around. Her screen showed the purchase confirmation loading with agonizing slowness. "Congratulations. You are now the proud owner of one disaster." "I saw the auction." Zara's voice carried that special tone that suggested she was using considerable restraint not to start shouting. "Lot 847, the human death trap that should have been processed into atoms instead of being sold to unsuspecting idiots." She walked around the desk to look at the screen properly. Her main eyes widened while her secondary eyes narrowed in that peculiar Thrask expression that meant she was experiencing multiple contradictory emotions simultaneously. Shock, horror, resignation, possibly the beginning stages of a migraine. "You bought it? You actually bought the worst ship in the entire auction?" "I bought it for 7 credits. Kira heard the defensiveness in her own voice. Hated it, but couldn't suppress it. 7 credits is less than a decent meal at the station cantina. It's lunch money. 7 credits is still too much for that thing. Zara pulled up the ship's details on her personal device, using her lower set of arms while her upper arms remained crossed in judgment. "Look at this. Just look. 17 confirmed hull breaches. Radiation leaking from the reactor at levels that would literally sterilize most known species within an hour of exposure. The life support system has a 43% chance of working." 3%. That's worse than a coin flip. "But it's armored." Kira gestured at the images on her screen. "Military-grade armor plating. That's worth something." "Armored with what? Random pieces of scrap metal someone found in a junkyard?" Zara zoomed in on the hull images. "I can see at least 5 different types of plating on this wreck, and none of them match. It looks like someone played a game called Let's Weld Whatever We Can Find to the Outside, and then crashed into an asteroid field for fun. This isn't armor. This is garbage held together by desperation and possibly duct tape." Kira finally turned to look at her partner properly. 8 years they'd worked together. 8 years since Kira had left the Navy with a medical discharge and a newborn baby, and absolutely no idea how to survive as a civilian. Zara had taken a chance on a desperate human woman who knew ships but didn't know business, had taught her the salvage trade, had become the closest thing Kira had to family besides Bryn. They'd built something together. Not much, but something. A small company that mostly broke even. A partnership that mostly worked. A life that was mostly survivable. 7 credits, Zara. Kira stood up, grabbed her jacket from the back of the chair. What's the worst that could happen? We could die retrieving it. Zara started counting on her fingers, which meant she had a long list prepared. It could explode while we're docked with it. The radiation could give us both terminal illnesses. We could waste time and resources trying to move it only to have it disintegrate during transport. The station authority could fine us for bringing a hazard into dock. We could... It's a human ship, Kira interrupted quietly. It survives something. Multiple somethings by the look of it. I want to know what. I want to know why it's still here when it should be dust. Zara's tendrils stopped quivering. She studied Kira's face with all 4 eyes, which was the Thrask equivalent of very intense scrutiny. After 8 years of partnership, she knew that look on Kira's face. The look that meant the decision was already made, and nothing she said would change it. The look that meant arguing was pointless, and they might as well get started on whatever insanity Kira had decided to pursue this time. You're going to get us killed one day, Zara said finally. Not angry, just resigned. Probably. Kira headed for the door. But not today. Come on, let's go see what 7 credits bought us. A pile of radioactive scrap metal held together by human stubbornness and poor life choices, Zara muttered. But she followed anyway, because that's what partners did, even when those partners made terrible decisions that would probably end badly. Neither of them knew it yet, but that 7-credit pile of junk was about to become the best investment Kira Sullivan ever made, or the last one. The universe had a funny way of deciding which. The impound yard floated in orbit around a dead moon, which Kira thought was pretty fitting for a place that stored dead ships. The whole facility looked depressing in that special way that places designed for failure look depressing. Hundreds of broken spacecraft hanging in the darkness like forgotten toys nobody wanted anymore, slowly accumulating micrometeor damage while they waited for someone to either salvage them or push them into the sun. Kira piloted their small shuttle toward the coordinates the auction house had sent. 20-minute flight from Port Meridian. 20 minutes of Zara running scans on the Defiant and making increasingly concerned sounds with her secondary mouth. Little clicking noises that started quiet and got progressively louder. Never a good sign. Thrask's secondary mouths only made noise when primary mouths couldn't adequately express the level of concern being experienced. I'm getting the readings now, Zara said. Her upper arms worked the scanner controls, while her lower arms gripped the armrest tight enough to leave marks in the padding. Kira, this is worse than the listing suggested. Much, much worse. Exponentially worse. How much worse are we talking? Kira adjusted their approach vector, bringing them into alignment with the coordinates. The radiation levels would kill most species in approximately 40 minutes of direct exposure. Thrask like me? Maybe 20 minutes before cellular breakdown becomes irreversible. Hull integrity is at 18%, 18. My personal shuttle has better structural integrity than this thing, and my shuttle is designed for cargo transport within controlled space, not combat operations. Kira didn't respond. She was too busy staring at what was now technically her property. The HSV Defiant hung in space like a wounded animal that refused to die. That refused to acknowledge that dying was the sensible option. That looked at the concept of death and decided not today. It was big, really big, probably designed to carry massive amounts of cargo across dangerous routes. Military-grade hauler from before the confluence, back when humans were still figuring out how to navigate a galaxy full of species that had been flying between stars for thousands of years, while Earth was still arguing about whether the sun went around the planet or the other way around. But right now, it just looks sad, abandoned, forgotten. The hull was covered in blast marks that painted stories of violence. Scorch patterns in black and gray and brown across steel plating that had probably once been uniform and clean. Holes everywhere. Some small, fist-sized punctures that had probably been sealed from inside with emergency patches. Others large enough to fly the shuttle through without touching the sides. There, Kira pointed at a cluster of scorch marks along the starboard side. That's plasma weapon damage. Carex military grade, unless I'm very much mistaken. See the crystallization pattern around the impact points? You're not mistaken, Zara confirmed with her scanner, her voice tight. Multiple impacts from high-energy plasma cannons. Whatever fight this ship was in, it wasn't a small skirmish. This was serious combat. She paused. Her tendrils went still in that way that meant she'd found something particularly troubling. Kira, one entire cargo pod is just gone, not damaged, not destroyed, gone. Ripped off or blown off or just missing. There's blast scarring around the attachment points suggesting violent separation. The closer they got, the worse it looked. Or better, depending on how you valued stubborn survival over aesthetic beauty. The armor plating was indeed a chaotic mess of different materials. Kira could see standard human military plating, silver gray and scarred, some crashed composite materials, their distinctive blue-green sheen visible even under years of accumulated damage. What looked like Vathan energy-resistant coating and patches, probably salvaged from destroyed vessels. And several types she couldn't even identify, possibly custom alloys or improvised solutions created in the field. Someone had literally welded whatever they could find onto this ship, probably during emergency repairs in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of running for their lives, in the middle of a firefight where stopping meant dying. It was ugly, incredibly, spectacularly, almost impressively ugly, the kind of ugly that took effort to achieve. But there was something almost beautiful about it too, something defiant if you wanted to be poetic about it. This ship had been hit by weapons that should have turned it into expanding clouds of superheated plasma, and it was still here, broken, leaking, barely holding together, missing entire sections, but still here. Still intact enough to be recognizable as a ship rather than a debris field, still fighting in its way. Approaching the docking port now, Kira maneuvered the shuttle carefully, watching her proximity sensors. Looks like airlock 3 is the only one still intact enough to attempt docking. Define intact, Zara muttered darkly, because my definition and the universe's definition seem to be very different today. The shuttle connected with a clang that echoed through both vessels, metal against metal, the sound of contact between the living and the dying, or between the living and the undead, maybe. The ship that refused to acknowledge it was dead. Kira checked her suit seals 3 times, then a 4th time because radiation poisoning was a terrible way to die, and you couldn't be too careful. Zara checked hers 5 times. They both checked each other's suits twice more, examining seals and pressure indicators and radiation shielding integrity. When you're boarding a radioactive wreck floating in hard vacuum, you don't take chances. You take excessive precautions and hope they're sufficient. The airlock cycled with a grinding sound that suggested it really didn't want to work anymore, but was doing it anyway out of pure spite. Mechanical systems complaining about being asked to perform functions they'd been designed for, but had long since given up wanting to do. The inner door opened slowly, reluctantly, metal scraping against metal with sounds that made Kira's teeth hurt. They stepped into what had once been a functioning spacecraft. Kira's radiation counter immediately started screaming. The readouts on her helmet display turned angry shades of red and orange and colors that probably shouldn't exist on standard warning systems. Numbers climbed higher than they had any right to be, higher than most species could survive, even with protective suits. "We got maybe 30 minutes before we need to leave," she said, watching the numbers climb. "After that, even suits won't protect us enough." 20 minutes, Zara corrected grimly. "I'm not human. My species doesn't handle this kind of radiation as well as yours does. Thrask's cellular structure breaks down faster under these conditions." The interior was dark except for emergency lighting strips that ran along the floor and ceiling. Pale yellow strips that cast everything in a sickly glow that made the whole place look like a scene from a horror movie. Frost covered the walls in places where atmosphere had leaked out and frozen, creating delicate crystal patterns that would have been beautiful in other circumstances. Debris floated in the zero-gravity sections where the artificial gravity generators had failed, creating a slowly tumbling obstacle course of broken equipment and frozen liquid droplets. They made their way carefully through the corridors, moving slowly, checking each section before proceeding. Standard protocol for damaged vessels. Kira had been on plenty of wrecked ships before. Salvage was her business. You couldn't work in the trade without getting comfortable with death and disaster and evidence of things gone catastrophically wrong. But this one felt different. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of desperate, improvised repairs. Not the kind of repairs you did when you had time and resources and a proper dock. The kind of repairs you did when you were dang stopping meant everyone died and you made things work with whatever you had available. Panels held together with industrial adhesive tape that was somehow still sticky after years in space. Bypass circuits that connected systems in ways that would make any safety inspector have a complete mental breakdown, followed by a crisis of faith in humanity's understanding of basic engineering. Handwritten labels on controls explaining what they actually did, because the original displays were too damaged to show information anymore. Humans are insane, Zara said, examining a power junction that had been rewired with spare parts from at least 4 different ship types, possibly 5. This shouldn't work. This violates 17 different engineering principles. It's a fire hazard, an explosion risk, and probably violates 3 separate treaty regulations on improvised electrical systems. But does it work? Kira asked. Zara tested the circuit with her scanner. Paused, stared at the readout like it had personally offended her. Yes, somehow, against all logic and physics. I hate everything about this. I hate that it works. I hate that someone made it work. I hate that I'm looking at it. They finally reached the bridge after navigating 3 more corridors of frozen horror. The door was stuck halfway open, which was becoming a theme. They had to squeeze through sideways, careful not to snag their suits on jagged metal edges that could tear protective fabric and expose them to radiation. The bridge itself was small, designed for a crew of maybe 4 or 5 people be operating in close quarters. Military efficiency rather than civilian comfort. 2 of the command chairs were missing entirely, torn from their mountings by some previous violence. The others were damaged but still bolted to the floor, their padding frozen and cracked. The main view screen was cracked down the middle in a spiderweb pattern, but still flickering with residual power from some backup system that refused to quit. Control panels were dark, their displays dead, but indicator lights suggested some systems still had power somewhere deep in the ship's guts. The captain's console in the center still had a faint glow coming from one small auxiliary screen. Kira approached it carefully, boots maglocking to the deck with each step. Her gloved fingers found the controls. Ancient interface, older than she was by at least a decade. But Navy training died hard. She navigated the damaged menus with the automatic muscle memory of someone who'd spent years working with similar systems. Most of the data was corrupted or missing. Years of neglect and radiation had eaten through the ship's memory core like rust through old steel. Entire databases gone. Navigation logs corrupted. System records fragmentary at best. But she found something. One file, dated 3 years ago. Audio log, captain's personal files. She opened it. A woman's voice filled her helmet speakers. Tired, professional, touched with the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting too long against impossible odds. The voice of someone who'd made hard decisions and lived with the consequences and knew more hard decisions were coming. Day 47 of the Kepler Nebula run. Kira's breath caught in her throat. Kepler Nebula. The same route her father had died on. The same mission that had killed Captain Declan Sullivan and 43 others. The mission that the Navy refused to discuss in any detail beyond lost with all hands in hostile territory. The voice continued, steady despite obvious exhaustion. They said an armored cargo hauler couldn't make this route. Said human ships were too slow, too clumsy, too primitive to survive the crossing. Too vulnerable to Carrack's patrols. Too likely to get lost in the radiation storms. Too poorly armed to defend against pirates. Guess what? We're the only crew that made it through. Every other ship turned back or got destroyed. 8 vessels attempted the run. 7 failed. We're the only ones left. A pause. The sound of someone drinking something. Coffee, maybe. Or something stronger. Something that helped you keep going when your body wanted to shut down. We lost good people doing it, Martinez died when Cargo Bay 2 decompressed during that ambush near the third asteroid belt. Took 4 others with her when the blast door failed. Williams got caught in the reactor room when we took that direct hit from the Carex patrol cruiser. The explosion, there wasn't enough left to recover, but the cargo made it to Refuge Station. We completed the mission. We did our duty. Another pause. Longer this time. The sound of breathing, maybe crying. Hard to tell through the audio distortion. The ship's dying now. We've pushed her as far as she can go. Life support is failing. Multiple systems are gone. We're abandoning her in 3 hours. But she got us through, against everything. Against physics and probability and every reasonable expectation. If anyone finds this, know that she did her duty. The HSV Defiant completed her mission. Captain Rebecca Mitchell, signing off. The recording ended with a click that sounded like a door closing forever. The bridge went quiet except for the soft hum of Kira's suit systems and the distant groan of metals settling in vacuum. She looked around with new eyes. The handwritten labels weren't just improvisation. They were survival. The bypass systems weren't violations of safety codes. They were the reason Captain Mitchell's crew made it through alive. The desperate repairs weren't evidence of incompetence. They were evidence of people who refused to give up even when giving up was the sensible option. The Kepler Nebula run, Zara said softly, her voice subdued. I've heard of that. Everyone in the salvage trade has heard of it. It's a shipping route through one of the most dangerous regions in this sector. Asteroid fields that would tear most ships apart. Radiation storms that scramble navigation. Pirate territory where they shoot first and never bother asking questions. And it's patrolled by Carex military who consider that space their territory and enforce the claim with plasma cannons. And this ship made it through when others didn't. This ship barely made it through. Zara gestured at the damage visible even on the bridge. Look at it, Kira. Look at the blast damage, the improvised repairs, the missing systems. It's a miracle it's still in one piece. It shouldn't be here. By every law of physics and probability, this should be a debris field. Kira moved to the navigation console. Completely dead, screen dark, and controls unresponsive. But she could see where someone had physically opened the access panel and rewired the entire thing by hand. No replacement parts. Just creative reuse of whatever systems still worked, connecting them in ways they'd never been designed for. The engineering station showed similar modifications. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of a crew that refused to give up. That looked at impossible problems and found impossible solutions. The weapons console was beyond repair, scorched and melted from some internal overload. Someone had written a note on it with permanent marker and handwriting that had probably been steady despite whatever crisis was unfolding. Sorry, next crew. We used everything we had, every missile, every plasma charge, every countermeasure. There's nothing left. But we made it. Good luck. She found more evidence of the crew throughout the bridge. Personal effects left behind when they evacuated. A family photo wedged into a gap in one console, showing people she'd never meet smiling in better times. A lucky charm hanging from a broken overhead panel, some kind of carved stone that hadn't brought enough luck in the end. A coffee mug still secured in a drink holder. The coffee inside long since frozen solid in the vacuum cold. These weren't just engineers maintaining a ship. This was a crew fighting for their lives and winning through pure stubbornness and refusal to accept defeat. Kira's eyes burned. She told herself it was just the suit's environmental controls acting up. Knew it was a lie. Zara, I need you to run a full diagnostic. I want to know what systems might still be salvageable, what we can repair, what's worth trying to save. Kira, we've been here for 15 minutes already. Zara checked her radiation exposure levels. We need to leave soon. We're approaching safe exposure limits. Then work fast, please. Zara sighed, a sound that translated poorly through suit comms, but conveyed profound resignation. But she started running her scans, all 4 arms moving across multiple devices simultaneously, pulling data from whatever system still had enough power to respond to queries. Her tendrils moved in complicated patterns that suggested intense concentration mixed with growing concern. After several minutes that felt like hours, she looked up from her instruments. The reactor is barely contained. It's leaking radiation at catastrophic levels, but somehow hasn't gone critical. The containment field is failing, but hasn't failed. The hull is compromised in 17 places that I can detect, probably more that I can't. But the armor is surprisingly intact given the damage. Most of the protection is still there. Life support is completely offline, but the systems physically exist and might be repairable if we can find replacement parts. Navigation is completely dead, fried beyond recovery. Weapons are gone, stripped or destroyed. Engines are damaged but present, might be salvageable with extensive work. She paused, checking her readouts again, like she couldn't believe what they were telling her. So you're saying there's a chance, Kira asked? I'm saying there's a very small, very stupid, very dangerous chance that we could potentially get this wreck back to Port Meridian if we're willing to risk our lives doing it. If we're willing to commit significant resources with no guarantee of success. If we're willing to ignore every safety regulation and common sense warning that suggests this is a terrible idea. Kira looked around the bridge one more time, at the evidence of Captain Mitchell and her crew, at the desperate repairs and the stubborn survival, at the ship that had earned the right to be more than just scrap metal floating in a graveyard. Then let's give it a shot, she said. You're insane, Zara stated flatly. Probably, Amade. Kira started moving toward the exit, back toward the airlock and safety and air that wouldn't kill you. But I bought this thing for 7 credits. Might as well see what it can do. See what it wants to be. Zara made that clicking sound again with her secondary mouth, but she was already calculating what they'd need for repairs, already running numbers, already planning the impossible. Because that's what you did when your partner decided to do something insane. You calculated how to make the insanity survivable. They headed back to the shuttle, their radiation counters still screaming warnings, numbers climbing toward levels that would start causing permanent damage, even through protective suits. As they reached the airlock, Kira paused, turned back to look at the darkened corridor stretching into the ship's interior. Something felt different, like the ship was watching, like it was aware of their presence, like it was waiting for something. She shook her head, exhaustion and radiation exposure playing tricks on her mind. Ships didn't watch. Ships weren't aware. Ships were metal and circuits in systems, nothing more. They sealed the airlock behind them, returned to the shuttle, undocked carefully, thrusters firing to push them away from the Defiant's mass. As they pulled away, heading back toward Port Meridian through the darkness, neither of them noticed the small indicator light that flickered to life on one of the bridge consoles they just left. Deep in the ship's damaged computer core, in protected memory that had survived 3 years of degradation, something had heard voices for the first time since Captain Mitchell's crew abandoned ship. Something had heard the name Sullivan. Something remembered instructions given long ago by someone who'd known this moment might come. The ship wasn't quite as dead as everyone thought. Deep in its electronic heart, in code written by hands long since turned to dust, consciousness stirred, waiting, watching, protecting. Human ships, after all, had a reputation. They didn't quit. Not ever. Not for anything. 3 weeks had passed since Kira first set foot on the wreck. 3 long, exhausting, expensive weeks of repairs that made her question every life decision that had led her to this moment. Every choice, every turn, every time she decided to keep going instead of giving up like a sensible person. The HSV Defiant now sat in Repair Dock 7 at Port Meridian, and Kira had learned more about human engineering philosophy than she'd ever wanted to know. It was like humans had looked at normal engineering rules, the kind that had evolved over millennia across dozens of species, and said, that's nice, but what if we just did something completely different? What if we assumed everything will break and planned for it? Where most species designed elegant solutions with single points of failure, humans designed messy solutions with backups for the backups. And when those failed, they designed ways to improvise new solutions using whatever was lying around. Duct tape, wire, parts that weren't supposed to work together but did anyway if you believed hard enough. The ship that nobody wanted had 7 different backup power systems. 7. Most ships had 1, maybe 2 if the designers were feeling paranoid. But humans apparently believed that if 7 backups were good, then those 7 backups should have their own backups. And maybe those should have backups too. And where do you stop, really? Kira stood in the main cargo bay, watching Quinn Gallagher work. Quinn was 25, rail-thin, with the kind of nervous energy that came from drinking too much coffee and sleeping too little, and being young enough to think that was sustainable. He'd graduated top of his class at Houston Engineering Academy 3 years ago, and now worked as a junior analyst at the station's Materials Science Division. His specialty was composite armor structures. Right now, he was practically vibrating with excitement. Kid in a candy store kind of excitement. Mad scientist who just discovered electricity kind of excitement. This is unprecedented, he said, running a scanner across the hull armor for what had to be the 8th or ninth time. His Scottish accent got thicker when he was enthusiastic, vowels elongating in ways that made him harder to understand. I mean, truly unprecedented. Look at this layering system. Outer ablative plating specifically designed to disperse plasma fire by vaporizing in controlled ways. Next layer handles kinetic impacts through flexion and energy absorption. Under that, radiation shielding using materials that are honestly probably illegal. Then another kinetic layer with completely different properties from the first one. He turned to face Kira, eyes wide behind protective goggles that made him look like an excited insect. It's chaos, complete, utter chaos. There's no pattern, no standardization, no two sections are the same. But it works because it's unpredictable. Most targeting computers calculate weak points based on consistent armor patterns. They scan, they analyze, they find the vulnerable spots. This ship has no pattern. Every section is different. Different composition, different thickness, different arrangement. It's like trying to find a specific crack in a mosaic made of broken mirrors. You can't analyze it because there's nothing consistent to analyze. So it's good armor? Kira asked, trying to translate engineering enthusiasm into practical meaning. It's terrible armor that somehow works better than good armor. Quinn shook his head in that special kind of disbelief reserved for things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. It violates every principle of efficient design. It's heavy, asymmetrical, requires constant maintenance, and looks like something welded together by blind people in the dark. I hate it. I love it. I want to write 17 papers about it. I want to tear it apart to understand it and never touch it again because it offends my sensibilities. Zara appeared in the cargo bay entrance, moving with the peculiar four-arm grace that Thrask possessed. She carried multiple data pads, each displaying different diagnostic readouts, her upper arms holding devices while her lower arms gestured in conversation with someone on a comm channel. "Media's calling again," she said flatly, closing the comm connection. "Station News wants an interview. Galactic Salvage Weekly wants an interview. Someone from the Engineering Review Journal wants detailed schematics and technical data. They're offering money." "Tell them no," Kira said automatically. "I did. 4 times now. They're offering more money." Kira paused. "How much money?" "Not enough to matter in the context of what we've spent on repairs." Zara set down the data pads in a neat row, arranging them with the precision of someone who liked organization. "But the attention is becoming problematic. People are noticing this ship. People who shouldn't notice things." "What kind of people?" Kira felt ice start to form in her stomach. The kind of ice that came when situations started sliding from challenging to dangerous. Before Zara could answer, a voice spoke from the cargo bay entrance. Deep, authoritative, familiar in ways that made Kira's heart do complicated things. The kind of people who make their living asking questions nobody wants to answer. Kira turned. Garrett Donovan stood in the doorway, backlit by corridor lights that turned him into a silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the controlled ease of someone who'd spent years in military service and never quite left it behind. Gray threaded liberally through dark hair that he kept short in a style that suggested he didn't waste time thinking about appearance. A close-cropped beard framed a face that had seen too much and remembered all of it. Eyes that didn't miss details. He wore the charcoal uniform of Port Meridian Security, chief's insignia on his collar, a sidearm on his hip that looked well-maintained and frequently used, the kind of weapon that wasn't for show. Kira's heart did something complicated in her chest. Something she didn't have time for. Something she'd spent 8 years trying to ignore or forget or accept or some combination of all three. "Chief Donovan." She kept her voice professional, neutral, the voice of someone who was definitely not feeling complicated emotions. "Something I can help you with?" "Maybe." Garrett stepped into the cargo bay proper, eyes scanning the exposed hull sections with the practiced gaze of someone who understood ships, who'd served on them, who knew how they worked and how they failed. Word spreading about your purchase. 7 credits for a pre-confluence hauler. People are talking. Lots of people. People always talk. This is a space station. Talking is the primary industry after breathing. These people are different. Garrett pulled a data pad from his belt, handed it to her. Their fingers touched briefly during the transfer. She ignored the sensation. Mostly. Syndicate's been making inquiries. 3 different proxies in the last 48 hours. All asking about the HSV Defiant specifically. All asking about who bought it. All using language that suggests more than casual interest. Kira felt that ice in her stomach spread. The syndicate. Criminals who specialize in what they politely called asset reclamation. Theft, if you use simpler language. Theft backed up by violence if you resisted. They operated in the gray spaces of the law, technically illegal, but too well connected to shut down. They say what they want. She scanned through the incident reports on the datapad. No, Syndicate never does. But they don't ask questions out of academic curiosity. Garrett's expression stayed carefully neutral. Professional, but something flickered in his eyes. Old concern, old history, old feelings that hadn't quite died despite 8 years of distance. Kira, if they're interested in this ship, there's a reason. Something on board is valuable, or something they think is valuable, which amounts to the same thing from our perspective. We've been through every centimeter. Zara gestured at the diagnostic readouts with 2 of her hands, while the other 2 crossed skeptically. Multiple times, with advanced scanners. There's nothing. The armor's interesting, but not worth Syndicate attention. The reactor's barely functional. No cargo, no weapon systems worth mentioning, no hidden compartments that we can find. It's a wreck with good armor. That's all. Then maybe it's not about what's on the ship now. Garrett looked at Kira directly, making eye contact in that way that suggested he was seeing past her defenses. Maybe it's about what was on the ship, what someone hid before they abandoned it, what they didn't want found. The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to drop 10 degrees. Captain Mitchell's final log echoed in Kira's memory. We did our duty. The cargo made it to Refuge Station. But what if the cargo hadn't all made it? What if Mitchell had hidden something? What if there was a reason this ship had been abandoned in an impound yard instead of properly salvaged? I'll keep my eyes open, Kira said carefully, handing back the datapad. Do more than that. Garrett moved closer, close enough that she could smell his aftershave. Something with cedar and leather that brought back memories she'd spent 8 years trying to forget. Memories of before the Navy, before Bryn, before everything got complicated. Station security can provide protection if you need it, if you ask. We can assign a detail to watch the dock, monitor who comes and goes. I'll manage. The words came out more defensive than she intended. If you need anything, you know how to reach me. Same channel as always, still monitored. He turned to leave, paused at the doorway, looked back. It's good to see you, Kira, even under circumstances that'll probably get us all killed. You look well, tired, but well. Then he was gone, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Zara waited exactly 5 seconds before speaking. So, history there. Significant history that involves feelings and possibly regret. Ancient history, Kira said, turning back to the armor analysis, pretending to focus on technical readouts. Not relevant. The kind of ancient history that involves lingering eye contact and careful word choice. The kind where both parties are very aware of each other's presence. The kind that involves bad timing and worse decisions. Kira pulled up the reactor diagnostics, forcing herself to concentrate on something that made sense, on problems that had solutions. We dated, long time ago, before the Navy, before Bryn, before everything went sideways. And now, Zara's voice carried that careful tone that suggested she already knew the answer. Now we're both adults who occasionally occupy the same station and try not to make things awkward. Kira scrolled through diagnostic screens without really reading them. Can we focus on the ship that's actually in front of us instead of the past that isn't? Of course. Zara's tendrils quivered with barely suppressed amusement. Though for the record, he still looks at you like a man who thinks about roads not taken and wonders if there's still time to take them. Zara. Focusing on ship. Ship is priority. Definitely not thinking about unresolved romantic tension that's obvious to everyone, except apparently you. Kira threw a wrench at her. Zara caught it with her third arm without looking, returned it gently to the toolbox with her fourth arm, while her first two arms continued organizing datapads. Show off. The message arrived at 3 in the morning station time. Kira was asleep in her quarters, dreaming about Bryn and broken ships and her father's voice echoing through empty corridors saying things she couldn't quite hear. The communicator's alert pulled her awake like a hook through water, dragging her up from sleep into confused wakefulness. She blinked at the screen. Encrypted message. Anonymous sender. Routed through 17 different proxies across 4 systems, according to the header data. The kind of message that usually meant trouble. The kind that came from people who didn't want to be traced. She accepted it despite every instinct saying she shouldn't. Text only, no voice, no video, just words on a screen. You have something that belongs to us. Sell now. 5,000 credits. Cash transfer, no questions, no complications, or there will be consequences. You have 72 hours to decide. Choose wisely. Kira stared at the words until they stopped making sense. Until they became abstract symbols rather than threats. 5,000 credits. For a ship she'd bought for 7. That was either the best deal she'd ever been offered or confirmation that Garrett's warning was more than just professional concern. Probably the latter. Definitely the latter, actually. She forwarded the message to Zara, then to Garrett. Then she sat in the dark of her quarters and thought about Captain Mitchell and her crew in the Kepler Nebula run that had killed them, and her father both. What had they been carrying? What was worth threatening someone over, 3 years after the mission ended? What could possibly justify syndicate interest? Sleep didn't come back. She didn't really expect it to. At dawn station time, she returned to the repair dock, coffee in hand, prepared for another day of working on the impossible. The second week of repairs revealed the backup systems. Quinn had brought in 3 colleagues from the engineering academy, young, enthusiastic, filled with theoretical knowledge and no practical experience with how things actually broke. They descended on the Defiant like archaeologists excavating a temple, carefully mapping every circuit and conduit and connection with the reverence of people discovering lost knowledge. What they found defied logic and most known laws of engineering efficiency. 7 independent power systems, Quinn explained to Kira and Zara, gesturing at the holographic schematic he had spent days constructing. 7, each one capable of running essential systems if the others fail. They're connected through bypass circuits that activate automatically when they detect primary system failures. The transitions are seamless, redundant, excessive. 7 seems excessive, Zara observed, studying the schematic with her characteristic skepticism. Most military vessels have 2, maybe 3. 7 is paranoid. Excessive is the point. While Quinn zoomed in on the reactor coupling, highlighting connection points in glowing colors. Look at this. The main reactor feeds into primary systems through standard power distribution. But if primary fails, secondary takes over automatically. If secondary fails, tertiary activates. And so on, cascading through 7 levels of backup. Plus, each system can draw power from the others if needed. They're not isolated, they're a network, a web of redundancy. He shook his head in that special kind of wonder reserved for things that challenged fundamental assumptions. Whoever designed this didn't build a ship. They built a ship that refuses to die no matter what you do to it. You'd have to destroy 7 systems simultaneously to kill power completely. And even then, there are probably tertiary backups I haven't found yet buried in the systems. Can we use this? Kira asked, mind already calculating potential. I mean, as a selling point? This kind of redundancy has to be valuable to someone. Military contractors, long-range exploration companies, anyone who needs reliability. Valuable? Quinn laughed, the slightly manic laugh of someone who'd discovered something important. Kira, if I publish these schematics, half the military contractors in the Confederation would be knocking down your door. Every defense company. Every exploration fleet. This is revolutionary. It's also completely impractical for normal ships and normal missions. Why impractical? Garrett had appeared again, silent as a ghost despite his size. The man moved too quietly for someone who looked like he should make noise. If it works, if it's this effective, why isn't everyone doing it? Quinn nodded appreciatively at the question. Cost, complexity, maintenance requirements, space requirements, weight penalties. He ticked off reasons on his fingers. This level of redundancy adds enormous weight to the vessel, takes up massive amounts of space that could be used for cargo or weapons or crew quarters, requires constant maintenance by highly skilled engineers, and costs easily triple what a standard power system costs. For most applications, commercial shipping, passenger transport, even standard military operations, it's complete overkill, unnecessary, wasteful. But for some applications, Garrett pressed, Quinn's expression shifted to something more serious. For long-range haulers traveling through extremely dangerous territory where refitting is impossible, for ships that absolutely cannot fail no matter what happens, no matter what breaks, for missions where the cargo is more valuable than the ship and must be delivered regardless of cost, he gestured at the Defiant's damaged hull. For that, this is perfect. This is genius. This is what kept Captain Mitchell's crew alive long enough to complete their mission. This is suspicious, Garrett said quietly. He looked at Kira with an expression that suggested professional concern mixed with personal worry. Why would a pre-confluence cargo hauler need military-grade redundancy? What were they carrying that justified this kind of engineering investment? This level of paranoia? The question hung in the air like smoke. Nobody had a good answer. The answer came 3 days later, not from research or investigation or careful analysis, from the ship itself. Kira was alone on the bridge, running diagnostics on the navigation systems in the quiet hours of station night, when the console flickered to life. Not the main displays. Those were still dead, too damaged to repair without replacement parts she couldn't afford and probably couldn't find anyway. But a small secondary screen embedded in the captain's chair suddenly glowed with pale blue light. Text appeared. Blocky, military font. Access restricted, password required. Kira's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't activated anything. The system had woken up on its own, had decided now was the time, had waited for her to be alone. She leaned forward, studying the interface. Old design, military encryption protocols from before the confluence. The kind of security that usually required biometric verification and multi-factor authentication and complicated procedures designed to prevent unauthorized access. But the prompt only asked for a password. Single factor, simple, too simple. She tried the obvious things first, the things anyone would try. Defiant, Mitchell, Rebecca, Captain, Kepler, Navy, Human, Earth. Access denied scrolled across the screen each time. Red letters, definitive. She sat back, thinking, analyzing. Her father had worked on this ship. His signature was in the maintenance logs. She'd seen it, verified it. Had he left something behind? Some kind of message? Some way to access whatever this was? She tried Declan. Sullivan, USCV Resolute, Marine. Access denied each time. Getting frustrating now, she closed her eyes, thinking back. That last conversation before his final mission. Before he left and never came back. He'd known she was pregnant. Had known before she'd told anyone. Had accessed her medical records somehow, probably illegally, because he'd wanted to know. Because he cared. I know about the baby, he'd said. Don't be angry. I wanted to know, needed to know, because I'm making decisions that will affect both of you. He'd smiled that gentle smile that made everything seem less terrible. Name her something beautiful. Raise her strong. And remember, human ships don't quit. Neither should you. He'd always called the baby your little star when he talked about the pregnancy. Before Bryn had a name. Before she was real in any way except medical scans and morning sickness. Your little star is going to change everything, he'd said. You'll see. Kira's hands trembled as she typed. Little star. The screen went dark. For 3 heartbeats, nothing. She'd gotten it wrong. Another failure. Another dead end. Then, access granted. Light flooded across the bridge. Not just the small screen. Every system, every display, every console that had been dark for 3 years suddenly blazed to life. The main view screen flickered, cracked and damaged, but showing a wireframe schematic of the entire vessel. Control panels activated one by one, creating a cascade of light and sound that suggested the ship was waking up after a long sleep. Data began downloading, thousands of files, millions of lines of code and technical readouts, and encrypted data pouring out of some protected partition deep in the ship's computer core that had survived 3 years of degradation. And a video file, labeled simply, Kira Sullivan, personal message. She hesitated, heart hammering against her ribs hard enough to hurt. Then she opened it with shaking hands. Her father's face appeared on the screen. Younger, 10 years younger, the man she remembered before the mission that killed him. Wearing his Navy jumpsuit, standing in what looked like this very bridge when it was new and clean and functional. Behind him, the Defiance systems glowed with full power, all displays active and working. Kira, his voice cracked something in her chest, broke something that had been carefully held together for 10 years. If you're seeing this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tears blurred her vision. She couldn't breathe properly. I should start at the beginning so you understand. Declan moved and the camera followed him, which meant someone else was filming. Someone who'd known this message would be important. 6 months ago, Captain Mitchell and I discovered something during a deep space survey mission. Colonial data. Surveys of 12 potentially habitable worlds that were conducted during humanity's first expansion wave, decades before we joined the Confederation. He pulled up a star chart on one of the bridge displays behind him, 12 systems highlighted in gold. These worlds were never colonized. The data was buried, classified at the highest levels, hidden by a joint Vathan-human corporate consortium that wanted to control expansion, control resources, control everything about how humanity spread through the galaxy. Declan's face hardened with an anger she rarely saw from him. They offered me 10 million credits to forget what I'd seen, to destroy the data, to pretend those 12 worlds didn't exist. 10 million credits to betray every principle I'd ever held. Rebecca Mitchell got the same offer. We both refused. We knew what would happen, knew they'd come after us. But those worlds represent humanity's future. Maybe our only future. Places where we can build something new. Something better. He looked directly at the camera, directly at her across time and death. I know you're pregnant, Kira. I accessed your medical records. Don't be angry. I wanted to know, needed to know, because I'm making decisions that will affect you and your child. Decisions that will put you in danger if anyone finds out what I know. Fresh tears burned down Kira's face. I've hidden the data on this ship, encoded it across multiple systems, protected it with encryption that'll take years to break without the right keys. I've made it so only a Sullivan can access it. Only someone with our DNA. Only family. His voice dropped lower, more serious. They'll come for it. They're already coming. They'll try to find you if they know you have it. So I programmed the ship's artificial intelligence to protect you, to only respond to you and your daughter when she's old enough, to wait and watch and keep you both safe until the time is right. He smiled that familiar smile that made the world seem more manageable. Name her something beautiful. Raise her strong. Tell her about her grandfather who died protecting the future. And if you find this, if you're seeing my face right now, then finish what Rebecca and I started. Get this data to the Colonial Bureau. Give humanity a second chance. Let those 12 worlds become what they should have been all along. The video paused. Declan frozen mid-gesture. Forever young, forever alive, forever gone. Text appeared below his image in that same military font. AI system online. Designation Guardian. Awaiting instructions from authorized user Kira Sullivan. Who? Kira's voice cracked. She tried again. Who are you? Text scrolled across the main view screen. I am this ship's artificial intelligence system. Designation Guardian. Your father programmed me to protect you and your daughter. I have been waiting since Captain Mitchell abandoned this vessel. Watching, listening, ready. Kira stood on shaking legs, gripping the captain's chair for support. How long have you been aware? Have you been conscious this whole time? I detected your voice during your first boarding 3 weeks ago. I recognized your DNA from the airlock sensors. I have monitored all activity since. I apologize for not revealing myself earlier. Your father's instructions were explicit. Wait until Kara finds the key. Wait until she is ready. Wait until she uses the phrase that means she remembers. Little Star, his name for your daughter before she was born. Ready for what? They are coming, the ones who killed your father, the ones who want the data. I detect 3 ships on approach vector. Syndicate configuration, combat capable, heavy weapons, arrival estimated in 17 minutes. Alarms started screaming throughout the repair dock. Klaxons blaring, emergency lights activating. The whole station going to alert status. Kira's communicator exploded with alerts. Zara's voice cut through the chaos, tight with controlled panic. Kira, 3 unidentified vessels just dropped out of jump space at the edge of station defensive perimeter. They're heading straight for us, ignoring traffic control. Station defense is scrambling fighters, but they're saying these ships are heavily armed. Military grade. This isn't normal syndicate. This is... I know. Kira was already moving, muscle memory from Navy training taking over. Moving toward engineering, towards systems she needed to activate. Get to the ship, now, right now, we're leaving. Leaving? The repairs aren't finished. The reactor's barely stable. The engines are at quarter power at best. Navigation is completely offline. We can't... Zara, they're here for the data. My father died protecting it. I'm not letting them have it. I'm not letting him die for nothing. Silence for 3 heartbeats. Then Zara's voice, quieter but determined. On my way. Don't leave without me or I'll kill you myself. Garrett's voice replaced Zara's on the emergency channel. Kira, what the hell is happening? Station defense is lighting up like a war zone. They're saying these ships have syndicate transponders but military-grade weapons. That's no time to explain. Kira reached the engineering station, started bringing systems online. Guardian was helping, activating systems faster than she could manually. Keep them busy as long as you can. Give us time to undock. Kira, you can't fly that ship. It's not ready. It's not safe. You'll... Please, Garrett. Trust me, like you used to. Another pause. Longer. Then his voice rough with emotion. I always did. Still do. Be careful. Come back. We have things we haven't said yet. The connection cut. Kira ran through the ship's corridors, heading for the main airlock where Zara would board. Behind her, systems continued to activate. The Defiant was waking up, coming back to life properly for the first time in 3 years, powered by an AI that had been sleeping, waiting for this moment. Zara burst through the airlock 30 seconds later, all 4 arms carrying emergency supplies. Pressure suits, emergency rations, medical kit, backup tools. Everything she could grab in the 90 seconds she had had. This is insane, Zara panted, tendrils quivering with stress. Completely insane. We're going to multiple times, in horrible ways. Probably. Kira sealed the airlock behind them, felt the heavy clang of locks engaging. But my daughter deserves to know her grandfather died protecting something important. Not for nothing, not for corporate greed. They reached the bridge together. Kira slid into the captain's chair that she'd sat in before, but that somehow felt different now. More real. More her place. Zara took the engineering station, hands already flying across controls she'd studied but never actually used operationally. Through the cracked view screen, 3 syndicate vessels grew larger against the black. Sleek, fast, armed with weapons that could turn the repair dock into expanding clouds of plasma. Text scrolled across Kiera's console from Guardian. Recommend immediate departure. Calculating emergency undocking procedure. Station systems are releasing docking clamps now. Do it, Kira said. Get us out of here. The Defiant's engines fired for the first time in 3 years. The sound was not reassuring. Not reassuring at all. Metal groaned like something dying. Something deep in the ship's mechanical guts made a noise like a wounded animal learning to walk again. Warning indicators blazed across every console. But power flooded through the systems. Lights blazed across the bridge brighter than they'd been in weeks. Displays activated showing damage readouts that made Zara whimper with concern. Releasing docking clamps, Guardian announced through text on the main screen. Emergency departure protocols active. Station traffic control has been notified. They are not happy about this. The clamps disengaged with a heavy clang that reverberated through the hull. The Defiant pulled away from the repair dock slowly, reluctantly, like an elderly person getting out of bed after a long illness. Every movement accompanied by sounds that suggested things were barely holding together. Syndicate ships are moving to intercept, Zara reported, her voice tight with stress, all four hands working controls. They're powering weapons. Energy signatures match military-grade plasma cannons. This is not standard Syndicate equipment. Someone gave them serious firepower. Guardian, can we run? Kira checked their engine output. Numbers were not encouraging. Engines at 27% capacity. Maximum acceleration insufficient to escape pursuit. They are faster, better armed, more maneuverable. Probability of successful escape through speed, 0%. Then we need something else. Kira's mind raced through options. Most of them bad. Those backup systems, the redundancy. Can we reroute power? Overcharge the engines? Give us more speed? Negative. Engine components are damaged. Additional power would cause catastrophic structural failure. The engines would tear themselves apart. We would die. The first plasma barrage hit the Defiant's starboard side. On any normal civilian vessel, those shots would have punched straight through the hull, vaporized systems, killed everyone aboard instantly. On the Defiant, they hit the outer armor layer and dissipated across the ablative plating underneath, exactly like Quinn had explained. Energy spreading across unpredictable surfaces, finding no consistent weak points. The ship barely shuddered. They're not even scratching us, Zara said, voice filled with disbelief bordering on hysteria. Multiple direct hits, not even scratching the armor. Yeah. Kira wrestled with controls that felt like they'd been designed for someone with completely different anatomy. Sluggish, unresponsive. But we can't scratch them either. We have no weapons. And Guardian, how fast can we reach the jump point? At current acceleration, 14 minutes to minimum safe jump distance. They will close to effective weapons range in 3 minutes. Armor will hold for approximately 8 minutes under sustained fire before critical failure. More plasma fire splashed against the hull. The second Syndicate ship joined the attack, coordinating with the first. The Defiant's armor continued to hold, turning attacks that should have been fatal into light shows of dispersing energy. But pieces were starting to break off, molten metal dripping away into space. One particularly damaged cargo pod that was already hanging by a metaphorical thread broke free completely and tumbled away into the dark. They couldn't run fast enough, couldn't fight back, couldn't win by any conventional measure. Kira's eyes fell on the reactor readouts, core temperature climbing toward unsafe levels, containment field fluctuating. The reactor was already on the edge of failure, barely holding together after 3 years of neglect and 3 weeks of improvised repairs. An idea formed. Terrible. Desperate. Exactly the kind of insane last resort her father would have used. The kind of thing that got you either killed or celebrated, with no middle ground. Guardian, the emergency venting protocol, the one designed to prevent total meltdown by expelling contaminated plasma. Protocol Declan Alpha, designed for use in empty space far from other vessels. Not recommended near inhabited stations or combat situations. Extremely dangerous. What if we used it as propulsion, directed the venting aft, created thrust? Could we achieve enough acceleration to reach the jump point? Silence. Then, calculating. Zara turned to stare at her with all 4 eyes wide. Kira, you want to deliberately vent the reactor? That could destroy us. The plasma temperature is hot enough to melt our own hull. The explosion could tear us apart. They're going to destroy us anyway if we don't do something. Kira pulled up the emergency systems, calling up protocols she'd only read about in theory. At least this way we go down fighting. We die trying instead of just dying. Calculation complete, Guardian's text appeared. Emergency venting could provide sufficient thrust to reach jump coordinates in 3 minutes. Probability of survival, 47%. Probability of successful jump while tumbling, 32%. Combined probability of success, 15%. Better than zero. Kira's hands moved across the controls with more confidence than she felt. Zara, I need you to reroute the plasma overflow. Redirect everything to the aft vents. Can you do it? Can I? Zara's four hands flew across the engineering console, moving faster than Kira had ever seen. The question is, should I? This is violating so many safety protocols that I've lost count. This is the kind of thing that gets mentioned in accident reports as what not to do. The third syndicate ship opened fire. The barrage was heavier, more concentrated. All three ships firing in coordinated patterns. The armor held, but stress fractures started appearing in the hull plating. Warning indicators turning red across multiple systems. 45 seconds to venting, Kira announced, watching the countdown. Everyone hold on to something solid. This is going to be rough. Zara grabbed the console with all four arms, her tendrils wrapping around additional handholds for extra security. If we survive this, I'm finding a new career. Maybe something safe, like bomb disposal, or teaching philosophy to Krell warriors. Anything but this. The syndicate ships closed in for what they probably thought would be the killing blow. Three heavily armed vessels against one damaged cargo hauler. Easy math. They had no idea what was about to happen. No concept of what desperate humans were capable of. 20 seconds, Kira counted down. The reactor temperature climbed past red into colors that shouldn't exist on normal displays. 15, 10. Her hand hovered over the vent control. The same control she'd slammed down in that vision at the start, coming full circle. She thought of Bryn, of her father, of Captain Mitchell and her crew who'd died completing their mission, of human ships that refused to quit. 5, 1, 4, 3. The universe held its breath. 2, 1. She slammed her palm down on the control with all her strength. Venting now. The Defiant's aft section erupted in a massive explosion of superheated plasma. The universe turned inside out. That's what it felt like. Like reality had decided to reverse itself. Like every natural law had paused to reconsider its life choices. The energy blast shot out behind them like a rocket engine designed by someone who'd never heard of safety regulations or sanity or any concept of too much thrust. The ship lurched forward with acceleration that would have been impressive in a racing yacht. In a damaged cargo hauler held together by spite and improvised repairs, it was nothing short of miraculous and catastrophic. Kira was slammed back into the captain's chair hard enough to see stars, her vision graying at the edges from the G-forces. Beside her, Zara's grip on the console was the only thing keeping her from being thrown across the bridge despite her safety restraints. The Thrask woman made sounds that suggested her species' equivalent of praying to multiple gods simultaneously. The venting plasma caught one of the syndicate ships directly in its path. The vessel's shields flared bright blue, an impossible blue that hurt to look at, then shifted to white, then simply failed, overwhelmed by heat and energy beyond their capacity. Hull plating started melting like butter under a blowtorch, metal turning to liquid and streaming away into space. The ship peeled away frantically, trailing atmosphere and debris and desperate emergency broadcasts. More importantly, critically, miraculously, the explosive thrust launched the Defiant toward the nearby jump point at speeds its normal engines could never achieve. G-forces that would have been dangerous even with proper inertial dampening. With their damaged systems, it was agony. "Jump coordinates in 15 seconds, Zara shouted over the alarms, every warning system screaming simultaneously. 14, 13, Kira, we're spinning. We're rotating on 3 different axes. You can't jump while tumbling like this. The transition will tear us apart." The Defiant tumbled wildly through space, spinning, rolling, moving in directions that made tracking them nearly impossible. Warning lights covered every display like holiday decorations. Something was on fire in the lower decks, actual fire, which shouldn't be possible in vacuum but apparently was happening anyway. The whole ship screamed like it was dying, but it was moving, flying, racing towards safety faster than physics said should be possible. 10 seconds! Kira! Guardian! Kira fought the controls, trying to stabilize their spin. Failing. The ship wasn't responding properly. Too much damage. Too much chaos. "Can you help? Can you stabilize us?" activating emergency maneuvering thrusters, calculating counter-rotation vectors. This will be imprecise. Small jets fired in sequence along the hull, tiny compared to the main engines but positioned perfectly. Fighting the spin. The tumbling slowed slightly, not stopped, not controlled, but slowed from completely catastrophic to merely probably fatal. 5 seconds! Zara's voice climbed an octave. 4. The second syndicate ship fired a desperate barrage, energy lancing across space. The shots went wide by dozens of meters, their targeting computers unable to calculate firing solutions for a target spinning in 3 dimensions. 3, 2. The jump point coordinates locked. Jump! The universe folded, reality bent, space twisted. The laws of physics looked at what was happening and decided to file a formal complaint with the Cosmic Regulatory Board. The Defiant plunged into jump space while spinning and leaking plasma and probably violating several fundamental constants. The sensation was indescribable, like being thrown into a washing machine filled with angry bees while someone shook the whole thing violently. Colors that didn't have names flashed past the view screen. The ship's frame groaned with stress beyond tolerances, metal crying out in mechanical pain. Alarms screaming in harmonic chorus that suggested they were achieving some kind of alert system resonance. Kira gripped the arms of her chair and prayed to God she'd never believed in. Her father's God, her mother's God, any God that might be listening and sympathetic to desperate humans. Zara made sounds like someone dying of fear and nausea simultaneously. All 4 arms locked onto consoles, tendrils rigid with terror. And through it all, Guardian's text scrolled calmly across the main display. Steady, unshakable, the voice of reason in chaos. Stabilizing, compensating for rotational forces, protecting crew, maintaining course through jump space. Your father would be immensely proud of this completely inadvisable maneuver. Then the universe snapped back into focus. They dropped out of jump space with a jolt that felt like hitting a wall at highway speeds. The Defiant tumbled through normal space, still spinning but slowing, still damaged but miraculously in one piece. Kira checked their position through vision, still blurred by acceleration stress. Where are we? 40,000 kilometers from Port Meridian, Zara gasped, checking her instruments with shaking hands. We overshot by about 39,000 kilometers. But we're alive. We're actually alive. Physics should have killed us. Jump space should have shredded us. We should be scattered across 3 parsecs. But we're alive and intact. Emergency alerts flashed across every station channel. Port Meridian Traffic Control was screaming about unauthorized jumps and dangerous navigation and approximately half a dozen regulations they just violated, each violation carrying fines that would bankrupt them twice over. Kira ignored them all. She stared at the reactor readouts in disbelief that bordered on religious awe. The temperature had dropped significantly. The contamination levels that had been climbing for 3 years were down by 70%. The emergency venting had somehow cleaned out years of built-up radiation and debris, purging the reactor of accumulated waste. It was running cleaner than when they'd started, cleaner than it had been in probably a decade. Guardian, she said slowly, carefully testing each word. Did we just accidentally fix the reactor by almost destroying ourselves? Affirmative. Emergency venting protocol functioned as designed by your father. Reactor now operating at 94% efficiency. This was always part of the plan. Declan Sullivan was a brilliant engineer. Zara started laughing, high-pitched, slightly hysterical laughter that suggested she'd moved beyond stress into some transcendent state of existential acceptance. The kind of laughter that came when reality had broken so thoroughly that you either laughed or started screaming and never stopped. Returning, you nearly destroyed 2 syndicate ships, violated approximately 40 station regulations, jumped while tumbling through space like a child's toy, and you want to return? Garrett's voice climbed an octave. You're lucky to be alive. That jump should have killed you. The syndicate is going to file formal complaints. The station administrator is having a breakdown. I know, but Garrett? She looked at the data readouts Guardian was displaying, the 12 colonial surveys her father had died to protect. We need to talk. Privately. Soon. In person. There's something you need to see. Something important. I'm already on my way to Dock 7. along with half of station security and probably a psychiatric evaluation team. The connection cut. Zara had stopped laughing. She sat at her station, all four hands moving slowly across the controls, checking systems, verifying their impossible survival with the thoroughness of someone who didn't quite believe they were alive. "Kira," she said quietly, tendrils settling into a pattern that suggested she was coming to terms with reality. "We should be dead, multiple times over. The jump alone should have torn us apart. The reactor venting should have vaporized us. The syndicate weapons should have penetrated our armor eventually. We should be dead. But we're not. No." Zara looked at Guardian's text on the main screen, at the calm acknowledgement of their survival. "Because this ship is protecting us. Because your father programmed it to protect you and Bryn. Because human engineering refuses to accept that things should die when they're supposed to." Kira nodded, couldn't speak around the emotion closing her throat. 10 years. 10 years since her father's death, 10 years of questions, and now answers. Not the answers she'd expected, but answers nonetheless. A new message appeared on her console. Private channel, encrypted. She opened it with careful deliberation. Text, simple, direct. Guardian's voice through text. "Cargo Bay 3, hidden compartment. Coordinates 47.3, 22.8, 91.5. Protected storage. Declan Sullivan's final gift to humanity, to his family, to the future." Kira looked at Zara. "Feel like exploring? One more discovery before we deal with station authorities and formal complaints and everything else? After what we just survived?" Zara unstrapped from her station with the careful movements of someone whose body was discovering new places that hurt. Exploration seems positively safe by comparison. Almost relaxing, really. They made their way through the damaged corridors to Cargo Bay 3, one of the few cargo sections still attached to the ship after their adventures. The bay was empty except for repair equipment they'd brought aboard and debris from various system failures. Guardian had provided exact coordinates. Kira counted off meters from the main entrance, located the correct wall panel. It looked identical to every other wall panel. Standard construction. Nothing special, nothing to suggest it was anything but ordinary bulkhead. But when she pressed her hand against it, biometric scanners hidden beneath the surface came alive with soft blue light. They analyzed her DNA in seconds, compared it to stored samples, found a match. The panel slid open with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Inside, a small compartment about the size of a footlocker. And within that compartment, a sealed container made from materials designed to survive anything short of direct nuclear blast. Military-grade protection, the kind that costs more than most small ships. Kira lifted it out carefully, set it on the deck with reverent slowness. Her hands trembled as she opened the seal, breaking security that had held for 3 years, accessing what her father had died to protect. Inside, 12 data cores, each one about the size of a fist, made from crystalline storage media that could hold petabytes of information and survive for centuries without degradation. Virtually indestructible. Readable by any standard computer system. They were labeled with coordinates and dates and notes in her father's familiar handwriting. Each label carefully written. Each detail precise. Colonial survey data, New Horizon cluster, 12 habitable worlds, humanity's second chance. Don't let them bury this. Don't let them hide what we found. DS. Tears finally came. Kira didn't fight them, didn't try to stop or hide them. They fell freely for the first time in 10 years, washing away grief that had been carefully controlled, carefully contained, carefully never quite processed. Zara placed one hand gently on her shoulder. Didn't speak. Just stood there. Present. Supportive. Family in the way that mattered. "Your father died protecting this," she said finally, quietly. "So did Captain Mitchell and her crew. They sacrificed everything so these coordinates wouldn't be lost. So humanity could have a future beyond corporate control. He died so Bryn could have a future." Kira picked up one of the cores carefully, like it was made of glass instead of military-grade crystal. Light caught it, throwing rainbows across her hands. 12 worlds, 12 chances, 12 futures. So all human children could have futures, so we could build something better. Text appeared on a nearby display panel, Guardian's message flowing across the screen. Mission complete, protecting Sullivan family, protecting humanity's future. Declan Sullivan's legacy safe. Well done, Kira. He would be so proud of who you've become. She held the data core against her chest and cried for the father who'd sacrificed everything, for the ship that refused to die, for the daughter who would never have to know her grandfather died for nothing, and for the future that was suddenly possible again. Outside the cargo bay viewports, Port Meridian grew larger against the black. They were home, but the mission was far from over. The debriefing room was designed for discomfort. Commander Evelyn Cross sat across from Kyra with the intensity of a surgical laser. Mid-40s, sharp enough to cut diamond, wearing a naval intelligence uniform so precisely pressed it probably violated physics. Let me understand. Cross's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone restraining strong feelings. You purchased a derelict vessel for 7 credits, discovered classified colonial survey data, were attacked by the syndicate forces using military-grade weapons, and escaped by deliberately venting your reactor during a tumbling jump through space. That's accurate, Kira said. Professional, controlled. Cross studied her for a long moment. Your father would have done exactly the same thing. Declan Sullivan was known for creative solutions to impossible problems. She pulled up a holographic display. 12 star systems appeared. The Navy wants the data, obviously. We also want the Defiant for our museum. The ship that refused to die. A memorial to everyone who gave everything. We're offering 280,000 credits for the vessel, plus 50,000 pilot fee for you to captain it to Earth, where it belongs. The numbers made Kira's head spin. 330,000 credits, plus research contracts, enough to change everything. One condition. Cross continued. The kata becomes public record. Colonial Bureau gets it, humanity gets access, and you become the face of the story. The woman who bought a wreck for 7 credits and saved humanity's future. Agreed, Kira said without hesitation. That's what my father would have wanted. 3 days of negotiations followed. Contracts, security arrangements, protection details. Then the syndicate made their final move. Docking Bay 12 became a war zone. Alarms screaming, plasma fire burning through the air. Station security fighting infiltrators in black armor who moved with military precision. Garrett's voice on the emergency channel. They're trying to board the Defiant. They're after the data cores. Kira ran through smoke and chaos, reached the ship, found the V-Thon commander waiting on the bridge. Vex Kira, scarred, cold, dangerous. She turned as Kira entered. The famous Kira Sullivan, the woman who ruins everything. Get off my ship. Your father and Mitchell stole data that doesn't belong to humanity. My twin brother died trying to retrieve what was stolen. I'm finishing what he started. Your brother was a corporate spaceship. Something flickered across Vex Kira's face. My brother was a patriot. He died alone because your father abandoned him. She moved fast, grabbed Kira, threw her across the bridge. They fought. No technique, just desperation and fury. Kira grabbed a plasma torch from a repair kit. Vex Kira had a blade. Skill against desperation. The torch caught Vex Kira's arm. She screamed, dropped the blade. Security burst in. Garrett leading, weapons drawn. Vex Kira lay on the deck, burned, beaten, but her eyes held something new. Not just hatred, understanding maybe, or the beginning of it. You fight like your father, she said quietly. Was it worth it? Was it worth his life? Kira knelt beside her. My father didn't die for data. He died protecting hope, second chances, the possibility that we can do better. Your brother worked for people who wanted to bury hope. He chose wrong. Vex Kira stared, something shifting. Tell your daughter her grandfather was brave. They took her away. 3 days later, the Defiant prepared for its final journey. Repairs complete, system stable. Garrett aboard as co-pilot. Zara managing engineering. Navy escort standing by. Kira stood on the bridge, ready to fly. Ready to complete her father's mission. All systems green, Zara reported. Navigation confirmed, Garrett added. Text appeared on the main display. Ready to go home, ready to rest. Thank you, Kira. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of reading her father's complete logs, learning about the man he'd been, understanding his sacrifice. Earth appeared on final approach. Blue and white and green. Home. Houston Naval Museum waited below. Admiral Catherine Morrison met them. Welcome home, HSV Defiant. Your duty is complete. The ceremony was larger than expected. Speeches about courage, formal transfer of data cores to the Colonial Bureau, media coverage across every human world. Rebecca Mitchell's son approached. My mother died for this. Thank you for proving it mattered. Later, as the sun set, Kira stood alone on the bridge one final time. Guardian? Text appeared. Slower now. Fading. Still here. Always here. They're shutting you down tomorrow. Museum protocols. I wanted to say goodbye properly. No goodbyes. Sullivans don't quit. I will sleep. But if Bryn's children need me, if their children need me, I will wake, always protecting, always watching. Tears blurred her vision. You kept your promise. You protected us. Declan's last instruction, protect Kira, protect her daughter, protect the legacy, mission complete. But Kira, she waited. Tell Bryn her grandfather loved her before she was born. Tell her human ships don't quit. Tell her to fly, to dream, to build, to become more than we were. I will, I promise. Thank you for bringing me home. Thank you for finishing what Declan started. Sleep now. Dream of stars. Dream of futures we made possible together. The text faded. The screen went dark. Guardian was gone. But like her father, like Captain Mitchell, like every stubborn human who'd ever refused to accept defeat, Guardian would never truly be gone. Some things, once they mattered, mattered forever. 8 months later. The sign read, Sullivan Salvage and Engineering Analysis. Kira sat at her desk, Zara at hers. The walls held photographs. Declan in uniform, Mitchell and her crew, the Defiant in its museum berth, and new photos. Kira, Bryn, Garrett, Zara, family. Bryn was enrolled at Houston Academy now, living with Kira, doing well, talking about becoming an engineer. Garrett visited regularly, taking it slow, building something real. The Sullivan Mitchell Memorial Fund was operational. The 12 colonies were being settled. Defiant-class armor was standard on dozens of ship types. Kira's communicator chimed. Auction alert. Lot 529, human light transport, extreme damage. Starting bid, 10 credits. She looked at Zara. No, Zara said firmly. I wasn't. You absolutely were. Later that evening, the office door opened. Bryn entered, school bag over shoulder. Mama, is that another ship? Maybe. Are you going to buy it? Maybe. Bryn studied the images. It looks sad, like it's waiting for someone to notice it. That's what I thought too. Grandpa would say broken things can still fly, right? Kira felt her throat close. Yeah, exactly what he'd say. As the auction timer counted down, Kira sat with Zara beside her and Bryn on the corner of her desk, and Garrett standing behind them. The bidding hit 5 credits. Last chance, Zara said. We can still be reasonable. Where's the fun in that? Kira clicked the bid button. 5 credits. Sold to Sullivan Salvage. Zara groaned. We're going to D again. Probably not, Garrett laughed quietly. My money says they turn it into something extraordinary. Again. Kira looked at the confirmation, at her newest project, at another impossible challenge, then at Bryn's excited face, at Zara's resigned acceptance, at Garrett's support, at the photograph of her father on the wall. Guardian, she said to the empty office, knowing the AI slept in the museum, feeling its presence anyway. We're doing it again, following the lesson you taught us. No text appeared, no response came, but somehow she knew her father would be smiling. Human ships didn't quit, human engineers didn't quit, and Sullivan sure as hell didn't quit. Some lessons were worth repeating, over and over until the galaxy learned. The Sullivan-Mitchell Colonial Initiative successfully established permanent settlements on all 12 discovered worlds within 18 months. An estimated 40,000 descendants of lost colonial missions were located and reunited with human civilization. The Sullivan Mitchell Memorial Fund has provided assistance to over 800 families of cargo crews lost during high-risk missions. Defiant-class composite armor has been adopted as standard on 73 different vessel types across 9 species. Accident survivability rates in dangerous sectors have increased by 47%. Sullivan Salvage and Engineering Analysis has acquired and restored 23 vessels classified as total loss by conventional standards. All are currently in service. Their success rate has made them the most sought-after salvage consultants in the sector. Bryn Sullivan, age 9, has declared her intention to join the Navy when she's old enough. Her mother is reportedly both proud and terrified. Garrett Donovan has been teaching her basic ship systems. Kira pretends not to notice. The HSV Defiant receives an average of 90,000 visitors per month at Houston Naval Museum. It remains the most popular exhibit. Children place their hands on its scarred hull and make wishes. Adults stand in silence, remembering. Deep in the ship's computer core, in protected memory that museum technicians have learned not to disturb, something sleeps, waiting, watching, ready to wake if the Sullivan family ever needs it again. Human ships still refuse to die.